This film explores the city of Birmingham during the early 20th century. Using rare historical footage, we look at the daily life, industries, and major events that shaped one of Britain's most important cities. By 1911, Birmingham had absorbed many surrounding rural parishes. The city suddenly expanded to nearly 3 times its original size, triggering one of the largest urban building programs in its history.
The film extracts used in this video have all been taken from the collection of Birmingham Central Library, and they show the city during one of its many periods of change and upheaval. In 1911, Birmingham had taken over its surrounding rural parishes, and had consequently increased 3 times in size more or less overnight. This led to a massive program of building, and the moving of much of the population from the run-down and overcrowded central districts into housing estates in the new suburbs during the 1920s and 30s. Despite all the building and the new amenities being provided, the city centre, and particularly the Bullring Market, still remained a focal point in the life of all Brummies. The Town Hall, the Chamberlain Memorial Fountain, the Council House, Victoria Square, the Hall of Memory, New Street, Corporation Street. As today, these were all familiar sights to the people that flocked daily by bus, train and tram into the densely packed centre of 1930s Birmingham. The actual city centre covered a relatively small area, really what had made up the old town in the 18th and early 19th century. But it was alive with the hustle and bustle of a busy industrial city. And this is what everyone still thought of as Birmingham.
By 1911, Birmingham had absorbed many surrounding rural parishes. The city suddenly expanded to nearly 3 times its original size, triggering one of the largest urban building programs in its history.
The market was at the heart of Birmingham's original settlement, and still looked much as it had done for the past 200 years. Bernard Jackson recalls his visits.
The best place to keep your money in them days was the women was down the top of the stocking. And you'd see the women take 10 shilling notes them days off the customers. They'd get a few in their hand, and then round the back of the store, up come the skirts and the stockings, down the top of the stockings. It just looked like they got a really big bad leg.
White coats and hats distinguish these policemen going out on point duty from Steelhouse Lane Police Station. In his report for 1935, the Chief Constable, Cecil Charles Hudson Moriarty, stated that the force consisted of 1,577 effective members, and that £15,388 worth of property had been reported stolen, of which they'd recovered £9,471. This film of King Edward's School in New Street must have been taken during their last year in the old building in 1935, before the move to their present location down the Bristol Road near the university. Most schools at this time still had drill lessons, but very few of them would have been able to match this display of physical fitness. At this time, most of Birmingham's schools, and much of their curriculum, dated back to the board schools of the 1870s. In fact, many of these buildings survive to the present day. In 1926, the Haddo report recommended that education should be remodelled, so that the education of children between 5 and 11 should be part of a primary process, and that all children between 11 and 14 should be given the benefit of a separate secondary education. The curriculum was to be broadened, and the days of the 3 R's were finally drawing to a close. It wasn't until after the Second World War that all school pupils were to receive free milk as part of the government's welfare scheme. But from 1930, a third of a pint bottles were already being delivered to many schools as part of a special scheme with the dairies. The price was a penny a bottle, collected by the teacher and paid to the dairyman. Midland County's Dairy in Corporation Street received regular reports from local teachers claiming their mid-morning milk led to a marked improvement in the health and vitality of the children, and what's more, led to a large improvement in the attendance figures. Sport, especially football, played a big part in the life of the local community. While the membership of the tennis, golf, bowling, football and cricket clubs was estimated at less than 5%, thousands of spectators turned up each week to watch Aston Villa, Birmingham and West Bromwich. This skiing scene might look like St. Moritz, but it is in fact the Lickey Hills, many of which were given to the city by the Cadbury family from the 1890s onward. During the era of the trams, this was also one of the most popular weekend routes.
At this time, many children left school at the age of 14. For many of them, factory work began immediately, often in difficult and dangerous conditions.
As early as the mid-16th century, Birmingham had begun its connection with the metal trade, and the 1931 census confirmed that 37.1% of all those engaged in industry, trade and commerce in the area still had some connection with this traditional Birmingham industry. While demand for iron bedsteads, hairpins and pen nibs may have declined, Birmingham responded to new fashions and demands, and its workshops turned to the manufacture of new light metal goods. Children left school at 14, and many would find themselves working straight away in the hostile environment of the factories and workshops, amidst the noise, grime, smoke and inadequate ventilation. Where safety regulations were still more or less unheard of, it was commonplace to lose a finger in an unguarded machine.
You started work at 14. There was 2 days holiday at Easter, 1 day at Whitsun. You didn't have a week's holiday normally. It did come in during the 30s that factories did have a week off. Normally it was 8 o'clock till 6 o'clock during the week and 8 till 1 on a Saturday. My first wages was 10 shillings. When I was 16 I got 12 and 6. I worked for Bladens, the blow lamp people. Very noisy, very mucky and very warm. A lot of people don't realise when they're talking, the pitch of the voice makes a difference to what is heard. So the factory, their pitch, they could talk to a man on the other side of the machine, whereas the normal person come down into the factory couldn't even hear what he was saying when he was standing next to them.
Birmingham at this time was still very much the city of 1,000 trades, providing anything from a pin to a steam engine, from pens to swords and guns to exquisitely beautiful and elaborate gold and silver services, with its small, cramped workshops serving right alongside its huge modern factories. While new modern factories were being built, often 3 or 4 miles out of the city centre, many of the older trades, such as the manufacture of buttons and studs and the jewellery trade, continued in their old and crowded workshops around Hockley and the city centre. Albert Judd, who worked as a milkman, had many memories from this time.
It was a machine where the bottles came up, and when the road was full, you had to push it in. And I done 1 hour behind one of those machines one day, and I said to my boss, the worst thing I've ever done was stand behind that machine for an hour. He said, don't you like it? I said, don't you ever ask me again. I didn't mind work, but behind that machine where those 2 women stood, it was really tough.
Midland Counties Dairy Limited was founded in 1913 by the White brothers James, Edwin, Fred and Harry. Originally, it was attached to their successful ginger beer business in Aston Brook Street, and the name Midland Counties was chosen to distinguish this side of the company's operations. The bottling of milk was quite a new idea at this time, and they undertook to buy only good milk from clean farms and to bottle it under hygienic conditions in clean, sterile bottles.
Birmingham became famous for producing everything from small metal pins to complex steam engines and luxury silverware.
You had iron crates, and the women used to handle them iron crates, and they used to handle churns of milk. The women at the co-op dairy where I worked, I can see them now standing there chipping milk up in there with the clogs on. They didn't wear Wellington. All we had was clogs and sacks. Everybody treasured the horses in them days. And then the shock came to me, and my boss said to me, if you don't learn to drive electric motor, you're going to lose your job. I've got one or two alternatives. I've got a light to drive electric motor, which I did. But it broke my heart, and I said, till this day it broke my heart. You see? But the milk trade was wonderful days. You had done a wonderful job. And the horse days was marvellous, you see. You stopped up all night dressing it, cleaning it. Midland Counties were specialised in their horses. Their boss thought the world of his horses, you see. And he used to give his men so much to dress his horse up, and you had so much allowed for your trimmings, you see. Your trimmings were 6 a yard in them days, and you had 10 yards of trimmings to go round your horse. I went to a horse show once, and I was going marvellous. The judge judged all over me, and then he said, take your ear pads off. I took the ear pads up, and he put his finger down my ear. He said, you can have second prize, your horse is dirty.
Ice cream had been introduced into Birmingham by the Italian community in the late 19th century. But it wasn't until 1922 that Midland Counties dairies started to produce it on a commercial basis. During the 1930s, they published a monthly magazine, The Dairy Maid, in which they gave health tips and recipes to their customers. They also gave plenty of encouragement to try their ice cream. Here's an advert from 1932. Ice cream is liked by everyone. It's universally popular. It's also the most convenient delicacy to obtain. Organisers of dances, dinners, whist drives, bazaars and wedding receptions should make use of the MCD Winter Ice Cream Service. The new central fire station at Gloucester Green was opened by the Duke of Kent in December 1935. The building, costing £147,000, provided a new and improved service with 57 fire engines and 278 officers and men. After congratulating all concerned with the building, the Duke declared it open and pressed a button on the platform, which instantly opened all the doors of the huge room. As soon as the new station was open, the men eagerly awaited an opportunity to put their new equipment into operation. But the days passed by without alarms, and the reporters practically camped out on their doorstep, waiting for the first turnout. The firemen carried out endless drills and exercises. The critics rejoiced and claimed that it just went to show that it had all been a waste of money after all. Finally, the spell was broken. After 3 weeks of waiting, the well-rehearsed men and machines roared off to a fire in St. Stephen's Street. And from then on, the central fire station quickly proved its value to the city.
Events such as coronations and national celebrations brought huge crowds into the streets, turning Birmingham into a city of parades and festivals.
The 15th Armistice Day parade took place on the 11th of November 1933. The Birmingham Gazette reported, by 10:30 the traffic was diverted and the crowd stretched far up Broad Street. The police band began to play. The slow and infinitely touching cadences of Chopin's Funeral March sounded out over the heads of the waiting populace. The war and post-war generations stood side by side. A contingent of university students, most of whom were still in nursery on the 11th of November 1918, took their stand next to the Limbless Ex-Servicemen's Association and a group from the Alexandra Musical Society. That quiet, waiting crowd was full of interest. There were men in it who'd been right through the war, and now, 15 years after ceasefire rang out over the battlefields, have no regular job of work to do. There were children born long after the peace treaty was made, who nevertheless stilled their restlessness for a moment, as if conscious of awe-inspiring events heavy upon them. The police, the fire brigade, St. John's Ambulance, Territorials, Boy Scouts, and the Legion of Frontiersmen all added the colour of their uniforms or their decorations. Men in mufti with unexciting bowler hats had rows of medals across their chests. All over Birmingham there was the same reverent pause for remembrance. In the Bullring, along Corporation Street, in 1,000 shops and offices, the silence was observed. Up to a late hour on Sunday, crowds were still filing past the wreaths at the Hall of Memory. And so begins another year of painful groping towards the secure peace that every nation in its heart desires. On the 12th of May 1937, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth were crowned at Westminster Abbey, and the event was celebrated throughout the country. Birmingham, of course, had a parade in Victoria Square. The main attraction in the centre of Birmingham was the ceremonial parade, at which the Deputy Mayor, Alderman S.J. Grey, took the salute for 40 minutes in front of the Council House. The procession, made up of HM forces in the area, was nearly 1.75 miles long, and was seen by 250,000 people, kept in order by 800 policemen and 200 specials. The parade commander, Colonel O.D. Smallwood, with the staff of the 143rd Infantry Brigade, led the ex-servicemen's contingents. In front marched 50 men of the Royal Navy, followed by a contingent of Marines, 4th, 7th Royal Dragoons, Guards, Old Comrades, Combined Cavalry, Royal Artillery, Royal Corps of Signals, Grenadier Guards Comrades, Old Coldstreamers. All marched up Steelhouse Lane along Colmore Row and into Victoria Square, accompanied by thunderous applause. After the procession, the fun continued into the evening. In Aston, young bloods on decorated motorcycles gave rides to small children and sang and sounded their horns as they rode around the streets. Thousands of people stayed in the city centre, cheering, shouting, singing, the wildest, merriest crowd Birmingham had seen since Armistice Day in 1918. Hotels and pubs were packed, of course, and in Witton Road, Aston and Summer Lane, musicians formed themselves into bands. The locals came out of their houses and everyone set about enjoying themselves for the rest of the afternoon and well into the evening, while lorry loads of shrieking children drove up and down waving flags, balloons and bunting.
When my father came home, his first thing he done was put the piano outside. And then he had a greasy pole. And that greasy pole was a barrel and a builder's pole, and he covered it with all the old grease he could find. Everybody brought, and there was a prize put on the top. Now everybody was half drunk, tried to clean the greasy pole.
We went round from party to party. Kids did. The party had finished, and so the older children would nip off round to see the mates, see what sort of party they got. If they got a bit better grub, they go and join that one. Afterwards, on the evening, the parents, teenagers and young adults would dance in the streets.
As the Second World War came to an end, people across Britain celebrated Victory in Europe Day. In Birmingham, the streets quickly filled with music, dancing, and spontaneous celebrations.
In 1938, the city celebrated the 100th anniversary of the receipt of its Charter of Incorporation, which had allowed the people of Birmingham to elect a town council for the first time. To mark this anniversary, statues were erected, banners lined New Street and Corporation Street, and an extravagant pageant was planned to take place at Aston Park from the 11th to the 16th of July. The usual thing happened, and it rained throughout the week. So the performance was extended to the following week to try and recoup lost ticket sales. The pageant was a massive undertaking by anybody's standards and aimed to present 8 historical scenes depicting events in the city's history, including the granting of the Market Charter, the Priestley riots, and Queen Victoria's visit to Aston Park. The Battle of Crecy was also included, but this appears to have been more of an excuse for a good punch-up rather than for any historical accuracy. There was an unrehearsed incident yesterday in the Birmingham Centenary pageant. In the Battle of Crecy scene, a horse and cart were being used to carry the dead men from the field of battle when the horse bolted. 2 dead men who were in the cart jumped out, while the horse raced on to crash into some railings at the side of the arena. No one was injured. The performers for each scene were drawn from different areas of the city, although there was some dissension from Yardley residents who initially refused to join in as a protest at what Birmingham had done to their district after taking it over in 1911. The Duke and Duchess of Gloucester were the guests of honour at the celebrations. After officially opening the new hospital centre in Edgbaston, they were received by the Lord Mayor, Mr. E.R. Canning, and the Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain. They were escorted to Aston Park to meet the legendary pageant master, Gwen Lally.
And Gwen Lally was a wonderful woman. She'd stand there, but her language used to be terrible sometimes, but she used to come to us children, and pat us on our head and say, "You've been good children today. I want you done better the next day." But he was a marvellous dude.
Amongst the thousands of costumes and properties made for the show at Pantomime House in Cambridge Street, perhaps the most well-remembered are the prehistoric monsters, christened Egbert, Ogbert, and Little Sydney, who were often seen having a trial run around the city streets, much to the consternation of local drinkers. The cost to the city for producing the spectacle was £31,735, and the income was only £17,900. Nowadays, this seems a small price to pay for an event involving more than 6,000 performers and seen and fondly remembered by so many Brummies, especially when you consider the very different mass gatherings taking place in Germany at this time, with the outbreak of war little more than 12 months away. Very little film, apart from official appeals, seems to have survived to record Birmingham's wartime years. This may be due to rationing and the shortage of materials, but fortunately several amateur cameramen were on hand to record the advent of peace. At 2:41 p.m. on Monday the 7th of May, war in Europe finally came to an end. The authorities took their time making an announcement, and Winston Churchill's official broadcast was not until 3 p.m. the following day. But as soon as the news leaked out to an expectant nation, parties spontaneously erupted across the country. The BBC announced at 7:40 p.m. that the following day would be a public holiday, Victory in Europe Day. But by then, the party was in full swing, lasting through until the Wednesday. After the crowds in Victoria Square had listened in silence to the King's broadcast, relayed from the Council House, the Lord Mayor, Alderman W.T. Wiggins Davis, in his ceremonial robes, spoke, saying how proud he and his wife were to be holding office at such a time, and how proud they were of the citizens of Birmingham for what they'd done towards victory. This was one of the final acts of the Lord Mayor in the course of a busy day, during which he travelled 90 miles on his tour of the city. Over 10,000 people crowded into Victoria Square, then let themselves go, dancing in circles and singing around the streets till dawn. Street parties were held in the afternoon for the children. Then everyone turned out to dance around the bonfires in the evening. Some enterprising souls had even stored away fireworks from 6 years before, which were put to good use around effigies of Hitler. Outdoors ran out of beer, and the pubs were packed. Nell Wilkins from Balsall Heath has vivid memories of the celebrations in her street.
Well, everybody came up to scratch with something. People had hoarded food, you see, during the war. People who were lucky enough to be able to hoard before the war. They'd bring all the stuff out they got left. You got bread and perhaps margarine or things like that. And spam, all those sort of things, you know. Nothing very thrilling, really, you know. And then, of course, there was the beer. There was what they called, there was the best beer, and then there was what they called the tens. And it used to be cheaper, but it was only like water. My dad used to think it was terrible. And of course people would just fetch it in bottles. And if a child fetched it, they used to put a little thing across the top, because you wasn't supposed to drink it on the way home. And they would drink it out of the bottles, you know, sitting around the bonfire drinking the beer out of bottles. But I can remember my mum, she brought out the old sofa and everything went on the bonfire. And like I said, if you were sitting on a chair by the bonfire and you left it for a second, you bet your bottom dollar, by the time you got back, that was on the bonfire too, you know.
The celebrations were really heartfelt by everyone in the city, as not only was there a great sense of relief over the safety of friends and loved ones fighting overseas, but Birmingham itself had suffered a great deal at the hands of the Luftwaffe. With its many factories providing essential equipment for the war effort, it had earned itself the right to become a prime target for their bombs. And from August 1940 till April 1943, the city suffered 77 air raids, which killed over 2,000 people, seriously injured 3,000, and destroyed 5,000 homes. In the minds of those enjoying their street parties must have been memories of the terrible bombing of the BSA in Smallheath, the night of August the 25th, 1940, when a raid on the city centre destroyed the market hall, killing 25. The night of the 25th of October, 1940, when a single bomb killed 19 in the Carlton Picture House, Sparkbrook. And the night of the 11th of December, when they'd been confined to their shelters for 13 hours during the longest raid of the war. Many children had been evacuated in September 1939. Although the majority returned home by Christmas, others had been away in rural safety for the duration. The 175,000 children remaining at home had suffered sleepless nights, temporary schools, lessons in shelters, drills, rationing, and some had grown up knowing nothing other than life during wartime. The long hours of war work, the nights of fire watching, the austerity, and the fears and anxieties of the last 5 years were finally over, and now was the time for the people of Birmingham to celebrate. Japan's capitulation, following the dropping of 2 atomic bombs, meant that the war was finally over, and those with friends and relatives in the East could relax and really celebrate VJ Day on August the 15th. The Birmingham Gazette reported, "Leaping fires from thousands of bonfires lit up the sky over Birmingham last night with a glare that could be seen for miles, and people danced around them till they almost collapsed from sheer exhaustion." It was not till the great piles of wood had been reduced to smouldering embers that they thought of going to bed, and by then it was nearly time to get up again. By the time Big Brum chimed midnight, Victoria Square was still filled with people who'd been non-stop dancing for hours. They started during the afternoon, dancing in groups to any tune, but after the King's speech, the band turned over to dance music, and then tens of thousands joined in. It was a more boisterously exuberant crowd even than VE Day. A 6-foot drum was trundled up the steps of the council house and wedged in the doors. Others climbed up the Victoria statue and crowned it with a battered top hat. Edward VII was similarly honoured by having a dustbin lid thrust into his stone hands. Later, he balanced a Belisha beacon globe on his head. The RAF band acquired an unwanted bugler, who straddled Edward's shoulders and chipped in with his bugle with most devastating effect. Many people had 2 VJ celebrations in one day. They were the expectant ones, who stayed up on Tuesday night to hear the midnight broadcast. Before Mr. Attlee had finished speaking, bonfires began to crackle, fireworks shattered the silence, and a jubilant crowd made itself heard in Victoria Square. Although there are rather a lot of nurses amongst these Kings Norton children, there are also some very topical costumes, like the Bistow Kids and the Bevan Boy, referring to a selection of conscripts who reluctantly found themselves sent down the mines by Ernest Bevan in order to keep this important industry running. During the 30s and 40s, carnivals held by students at Birmingham University became a regular part of the social calendar. Normally held on a Saturday in October, the carnival was intended to raise money for local hospitals, but also provided the students with an opportunity to indulge in a bit of exhibitionism. It was an all-day affair. You could stand in town and watch the floats in the morning, the torchlight procession in the evening, then attend a dance till the early hours of the morning. And so ends our journey through time. We hope it brought back fond memories.